let's get real here. Cyber threat, we hear about it as a threat, catastrophe, systemic risk. It's everywhere. How big a deal is systemic cyber? Well, I'm going to surprise you. After my talk, you probably won't believe me, but I'm in it for the long haul. Here we go. Cyber looks pretty scary if you read the news, right? We have our, Tavarishi with sandworm in Russia causing mayhem in the wires. China with Volt Typhoon, among many others, is reason for concern. And then, of course, if you're not worried enough, Lloyd's is here to scare the hell out of you, saying that a systemic attack on the global financial system could cost upwards of $3.5 trillion over 5 years. Now, I'm here to tell you that you need to take all of this with a grain of salt. All right, the doors aren't wide open. You're not going to get cyber carnage. There is certainly cyber risk day to day, attritional, if you will. There's certainly cyber catastrophe risk as well. But if you think the world is going to end because some hacker's in his mom's basement causing trouble, don't worry about it. And if you're worried that state actors want to destroy your business, I'm here to tell you they don't care about your business. They want to spy on other governments. It's far more cost effective. I'm not joking on that one at all. The cost of NSO Pegasus as spyware was about as much as a high-end 5th-generation fighter jet. Cyber's not cheap. Okay, so the cyber threats remain largely misunderstood by the global insurance and reinsurance industry. We need context. Let me take a breath here for a second to explain. In addition to my day job as a reinsurance broker, at night I'm working on a PhD on the cyber insurance protection gap as an economic security problem. So I do the nerd stuff here. And what I found in talking to cyber insurers and reinsurers is that they don't seem to be talking to think tanks, governments, and security personnel. So when I go down to Washington, D.C., or when I'm at Whitehall in London, their view of cyber threats, cyber catastrophe, state actor, major cyber risk is unlike anything I've heard in the reinsurance industry. The stuff we're worried about, the reasons we fight for all these war exclusions, that's not where the problem's going to come. Okay, let's run through the numbers for a minute because this will help kind of give us a benchmark, right? We all hear that cyber insurance is small. It's this dopey little sector nobody trades in. It's mostly American. Reinsurers mop up most of it. And at the end of the day, it's all going to blow up our balance sheets in ways we could never imagine, right? I'll share with you that I spent time with an insurance executive in London, and it was an out-of-body experience. This guy tells me, look, we don't write cyber because forget about a week. What if somebody shut down the internet for a day, just one day? And I was like, look, man, the entire internet worldwide, all of it for a day? And he said, yeah, it'd be catastrophic. And my answer involved profanity. It's not going to happen. Just because these things are seemingly connected, it doesn't mean the doors are all open, right? Okay, so let's run through. Worldwide insurance premium. Remember, these are estimates. Nobody agrees on them. Around about $14 billion worldwide at the end of last year. Around $6.5 billion of that in reinsurance. So I've heard that 50% to 65% is ceded. I don't buy the 65% number. That's why my range is 55. What's really interesting, though, of the cyber reinsurers in the market, the top 5 are about half. So if you were to pull any one of the top 5 out of that market, the whole thing gets strained quickly. And what's interesting is number 4 has only been in the market for less than 2 years. Not bad to get up to $500 million in premium pretty quickly, right? So quota shares are still dominant. I know we all love the cap on story at a Q4 last year. Reality is, though, it's about $510 million in limit out of this, right? And that's limit, not premium. Quota shares still rule the day, which are great because you can shovel it all off your books and it's not your problem. But what is your problem is that you're shoveling your premium out with it. And there isn't enough reinsurance capacity out there for everyone to keep doing this. So if you read some of the reports out there saying that cyber reinsurance is going to be bigger than property cat, cyber insurance or cyber reinsurance is going to be 100 billion in premium in 10 years. No, it's not true, right? Not unless everything changes really soon. What's interesting is that you got about 400 billion in limit outstanding. I found that through my research. All right. Swiss Re puts the market at 10% penetrated, implying 4 trillion in addressable. What's interesting is that that comes against about 100 trillion in global GDP. And you might think, oh, what about the rest? Well, the rest isn't addressable by insurance, which is fine. I mean, if you think that's a problem for cyber, wait until we talk about flood, right? So, and what's also interesting is that you've got about 60% of this written out of the US right now, and US share is falling. The market's remaining largely static. So we're seeing new markets come into the cyber market more and more. I think it's outstanding for a lot of reasons, because if anybody tells you cyber is not diversifiable regionally, gently, quietly walk away from them because they're not stable. Now, what are some of the trends we're seeing here? First off is premiums going up, but limits flat. That means people are leaving the market. There are end buyers saying, you know what? This isn't a good deal. I'll take it net. I'll self-insure. And you might think that it's the smaller and less sophisticated companies that are like that. It's the other way around. It's the big guys. If you take somebody like Apple or Netflix or Amazon, they generate such incredible amounts of cash. It's actually cost effective for them to self-insure because at least it makes that cash productive, right? So you've had, I think Morgan Stanley was the big one that took their cyber insurance down by 400 million in limit from 600 to 200. So it's more cost effective to self-insure. The days of cyber at any price are long gone. End buyers are now realizing, wait a second, we're not under constant threat. We're not being specifically targeted. Yeah, there are problems out there, but we know how to recover. So you know what? We want some service. We don't want you excluding everything. You know what? Show me some value, insurers. And then for insurers are turning to reinsurers, and they're starting to say the same thing. That, you know what? I don't want to just shovel it out by quota share anymore. Give me an ag stop loss. Give me an event excess of loss cover. I want to keep some profit. And hey, insurer, I want you to get reinsurer. Go back to your old job of taking the volatility. That's what you do in property cat. That's what you should be doing here. Give me an event cover. And as a reinsurer, the biggest opportunity is that they're missing the chance to go back to their old job, because that's actually a great spot to be in. So there's a lot of potential in cyber insurance and reinsurance, but we got to figure out some of the details now. The early days are done, and now we got to earn our progress, right? Well, what's been standing in the way of that? Couple of things. First off, we don't know what we don't know, and that scares the hell out of us. It really does. But you know what? The only reason we have all these unknown unknowns, is because we haven't done our homework. Let's take cyber war as one of my favorites to talk about, given my PhD, right? Everybody thinks that it's really scary. Well, we now have a lot of empirical evidence to show that cyber war, when prosecuted, is highly ineffective. I mean, not far from here, unfortunately, there is a war going on, and it is largely kinetic, bullets and bombs, because cyber, bits and bytes, didn't really do anything. What happened is, right before the conflict, as part of their cyber war strategy, the GRU went and tried to buy out ransomware access points for Ukrainian critical national infrastructure, right? Because this is a broke market ransomware. So they didn't have the access points to go shut down things like power plants. So they went out to try to buy them. And they found that for these goods, the shelves were as bare as a Soviet grocery store. You know what? Because these are hard to get. These are rare, precious commodities. So they went out and lost a major angle on their cyber war strategy. The dirty little secret is it wouldn't have worked anyway, because reversibility is the most important principle in cyber. Namely that, unlike nuclear, unlike carpet bombing, cyber damage is pretty easy to remedy, pretty fast to fix, which means the runaway sorts of damage that insurers and reinsurers are worried about, like runaway business interruption, it's actually not really a problem. Okay, so my promise to Danielle, I got to move along a little more quickly. High rates of quota share, this is what's interesting. Everyone's worried that the big one hasn't happened yet. A, I'll show you a chart that shows that it probably has. And B, the word yet bothers me, right? Just because we haven't seen it, it doesn't mean it hasn't happened. I'll go back to Erdem's presentation a moment ago. The big one hasn't split Florida in half yet. Will it? Probably not, right? So we shouldn't say yet, right? We need some evidence to show that it's imminent to go with yet. The biggest problem is that we don't understand the way state actors work. I was talking to somebody recently who said, I want to move into cyber reinsurance, but I feel like I need to hire an expert. I should go find one of those tech security nerds. I was like, no, they're going to show you the plumbing. It's important. But what you need is to find someone who can go out and tell you how state actors make decisions with regard to cyber attacks and cyber defense. Because the big cyber catastrophes, and that's what we're talking, right? CAT, that's not going to come from some guy in his mom's basement. It's not going to come from an actor like Alpha V or Conti or one of the Russian sanctioned ransomware gangs. And it's not going to come from Iran. It's not going to come from China because they're into espionage like the US and the UK. So the reality is, where's it going to come from? That's a motivation discussion. That's a state actor discussion. It's a politics and international relation discussion. We got a few steps we have to figure out before we work our way down to the nerds who are pulling digital triggers. And then finally, the belief that a systemic and catastrophic cyber risk is too big for insurance balance sheets to handle. Wait until those critics hear about property, right? Okay, so I could torture Daniela and Sergio and say I'm going to read through this word by word given the time crunch. Wow, I didn't think you'd be amused by that. I'm sure the slides will be circulated later. If they're not, hit me up, call me, LinkedIn, whatever. I'll send you everything. But here's the deal. We got a lot of myths and we got a lot of ways to debunk them. So first, the big one hasn't happened yet. I've gone on enough about that. Choose your state actor can cause mayhem, right? No, we know they can't because they've tried, right? Do you think that in the conflict across the border right now, Russia has not succeeded in cyber war because they didn't want to? No, they tried like hell. They failed, right? Cyber war doesn't work. The scholarship on this goes back decades. Hackers can choose targets at will. This is probably the biggest myth on the slide. Hackers don't just go target someone and really work it. They buy targets of opportunity. They go out and find a broker who connects them with the available access points. They might be able to do some choosing. You know what? I want a big pharma company. I want a big retailer or a manufacturer. I want a government target. But they're choosing from a list of menu items. They're going to buy what they think they can use. They'll attack it. They'll try to make their money. And if they can't, they move on. The notion that they're looking for you specifically. No, sorry, guys. Doesn't work that way. The bad guys were always one step ahead. This is also a massive myth. Generally speaking, defensive cyber is extremely robust. And if the bad guys were always one step ahead, the world would look a lot different right now. It really would. The headlines are one thing. The realities of digital activity are another. And finally, the last one is a real sensitive point for me. You know, cyber risk and financial markets are highly correlated. No, right? There are only a handful of cases where a cyber attack was correlated with an individual security, like SolarWinds, like Heartland Payment Systems. The notion that a cyber attack could actually move the entirety of financial markets, not a chance. Hasn't happened, isn't going to happen. Let's take a look at this for a second. This is original research I've conducted. It's been validated by 2 think tanks and published in The Economist 2 weeks ago. So it's legit. This is real deal stuff. This shows you historical cyber catastrophes since 1998. So to be a cyber cat, at least $800 million in economic loss adjusted to 2023 at an annual rate of 3%. Don't come for me on the 3%. Every inflation number is wrong. I know that. Additionally, it's got a number of events since then. So 800 mil, significant number of victims, and some amount of public information to make it possible to assess the economic loss. There are about 10 or 15 years there that look pretty bad. And if I were coming to this clean, I'd wonder what the hell happened in the 10, 15 years ago. What's crazy though, is I was around back then and I worked in tech for a good part of it. And what's interesting is it was expensive because we didn't have any security and we didn't know what we were doing. I remember the Melissa and I Love You viruses of 99 and 2000. Some idiot would double click a file he couldn't recognize because we did that back then. And then someone would yell over the cubicle walls, "Don't click that! I screwed up and hit the virus." This was a well-funded venture capital-backed tech company in 2000, right? We've come a long way. Security is built into products. It's built into our cultures. We don't just get warnings about it and talk about it. There's a lot of it that's done before we even get the tech to use. And that's why the number of cyber catastrophes, which peaked at 120 million in economic, 120 billion dollars in economic loss in 2003, are down to virtually nothing now. You know, it's crazy if you step back and said, all right, I got one for you. What happens if there are back-to-back state actors who cause major cyber catastrophes? And let's say that both of those state actors are like top 5, top 10 of the bad guys in the world for this stuff, right? What would happen if that befell us, two attacks like that in the same quarter? I can now tell you that that's 2017 and you can barely see it. That was WannaCry, launched by North Korea, $4 billion in economic loss at the time, followed it almost immediately by NotPetya, which was a Sandworm, Russian-backed, $10 billion in economic loss at the time, which I think is actually overinflated. And you could even go further in 2017. You had a bunch of little ones like Bad Rabbit. 2017 wasn't a bad year, even if you add them all up. Not historically. We absorbed that. What's crazy is you talk about these two events at $14 billion economic being a lot. That's not even the insured loss from Hurricane Harvey. 2017 was a mess for NatCat. It was incredibly expensive, and this isn't even a hailstorm. So let's get real. Economic losses are getting better for cyber. There are fewer events. The 22 and 23, Move It, Change Healthcare, less than $1 billion economic. They meet the definition, but it's hard to get worked up over them, right? Security's getting better. We're getting smarter about how we use technology. And what this means is it's harder and harder and harder to do less and less damage. Something like NotPetya was one of the most sophisticated cyber attacks, or one of the most sophisticated cyber weapons in the world in history. And it scraped its way to 10 billion economic. That says a lot about how good things have gotten. There's always going to be bad guys trying to do bad things. But when it's harder and harder for them to do bad things and they get less and less for it, I call that a positive. Okay, I'm in the home stretch, Daniela, don't worry. To give you a sense of how bad cyber catastrophe economic loss is, again, we're not even talking insured. Economics is the foundation for what could be insured. The yellow bars are economic losses adjusted for inflation for natural disasters. And we don't worry about that sector, right? If you squint, you can see the little blue bars that represent cyber economic losses for the same period. My back of the napkin on this is that economic losses from cyber cat are less than 7% of economic losses from natural catastrophes during that period. So if our industry can absorb nat cat, which we do, and we do well, we do it in expensive and difficult places. You look at where the biggest nat cat losses are, it's where the biggest economies are, and they get hit all the time. US, Japan, Mexico. We can handle cyber. If anything, I worry a lot less about cyber and I worry a lot more about hurricanes. I've seen cyber attacks and I have lived through many hurricanes, being a New Yorker and now being based in Bermuda. They do a lot of damage. Cyber attacks are fixed quickly. All right, let's get down to brass tacks here, right? What do we have to do? First off, education, education, education. The problem is we've got to teach the right stuff. If you read most of the propaganda that's out there right now from cyber insurers and reinsurers and reinsurance brokers, it's hype. It's either hype about how big the market's going to get, or it's warnings about how you have to exclude war, critical infrastructure, and cat. No, let's get back to basics here, right? Let's look at the frequency. Let's look at the severity. Let's look at the things that worry us, and let's build a plan we can deploy to this. You know, we have to use this as a way to build out a better platform of non-proportional reinsurance. For a market like Romania right now, which is less developed for cyber, not hard to go out and get quota share capacity for the Romanian market for cyber insurance. Call me. I mean, it's diversifying. It's interesting. It's an easy win. What we really need is for someone to develop a non-proportional product, either for the major insurers or for the quota share providers as a retro product to help them deploy to newer and more interesting markets, right? We can't just do what we've been doing. We have to help insurers deploy. We have to help insureds buy, and we have to help reinsurers get back to their job of taking out the volatility instead of just trying to pretend they're insurers with an insurer front end. We need to understand the benefits of diversification. You know what? Cyber is not one thing. This notion that the whole world is connected and I can take it all down with one click, not realistic. Different countries have different languages, different tech stacks, and different customs. If you've got to negotiate ransomware, it's going to be a lot different from Japan from the way it is in the US, right? We need to think about new forms of risk transfer, but we have to get the price right. What happens is insurers want more alternatives. Reinsurers could use some tools for retro. Someone comes in and says, I'm going to do a parametric or an ILW with a 20% multiple to expected loss, and you're just going to take it and I'm going to win and have a laugh. No, insurers have already proved they're not going to buy it at any price. Just like insureds decided that with the original insurance product. We need to get serious about hitting clearing prices. We're at that point in the cycle. Exclusions. Let's not just exclude things because it's easier than understanding them. It's time to do the homework. And finally, that's my last point. Let's look for ways to get deals done, right? It used to be, you have to talk me into taking a risk in cyber. We're done. This is a real market now. No more talking you into doing it. We get together. We got to find a way to get it done because that's the only way the market's going to grow. Any quick questions? I know quick. Don't worry. Are you afraid of Daniela? Yeah. No worries. Hit me up afterward. Additional reading, ask for the slides. I'm Tom JOHANSMEYER. I'm out of Bermuda, but I work around the clock. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.